when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the combination of those identities. There's something for everyone at DSW. Thank you for joining us. Before we kick off, please join me in recognizing our DSW sponsors.
Hi, Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, CEO of Food Maven and co-chair of Denver Startup Week, the largest free entrepreneurial event in the world, and it's only possible thanks to the support of our sponsors. We have nearly 40 sponsor companies who contribute to make DSW possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our title sponsors, Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Xero. Our track sponsors who have made all the great content you're hearing today possible: Battery 621 in the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing you inspiration from around the country. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now let's get to it.
Quizlet is a global learning platform that provides engaging study tools to help people practice and master whatever they're learning. Every month, over 50 million people use Quizlet to study any subject imaginable for school, work, or as part of their personal interests.
Quizlet is super efficient, and I often, walk to class with it on my phone or even just before I go to sleep.
Combining cognitive science and machine learning, Quizlet guides students through adaptive study activities to confidently reach their learning goals. Quizlet has over 200 employees across 3 offices in San Francisco, Denver, and London.
Being at the Denver Quizlet office for the last year has been pretty incredible. Seeing the office grow while maintaining its, core connections to our values. It's been an incredible experience to be a part of, seeing how humble, candid, and open everyone has been, and being part of a mission-driven company in a time of uncertainty has been incredibly rewarding. So I look forward to, what the future brings, because the last year's been a wonderful experience. Thank you, Quizlet.
Hey everyone, my name's Adam Bauman and I'm part of the Quizlet team here in Denver. I'm proud to work for a company that's goal is to help every single person on this earth become a better lifelong learner. One of my favorite things about working at Quizlet is how much we follow our company values. There's always learning opportunities. We encourage everybody to teach themselves something new, as well as help each other learn. Whether it's from art classes or lunch and learn talks on latest technologies, there's always something new to find and help yourself grow. And I really feel like that's one of the best things that any company can offer is growth and opportunity.
Thank you to our sponsors for the support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. A special shout out also to Quizlet for being our developer track sponsor. With that said, I'm very excited for this upcoming session. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Gray, who's going to say a few quick words. We'll then start the pre-recorded session. Mike will be available for Q&A during the session, and I believe he's going to come back after if folks have additional questions. So I'll turn it over. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks. Hello, Denver Startup Week. Very excited that you folks are here, and I'm very honored to be a part of this session. With sentiment analysis, this is really just an opportunity to have some fun, and I'm looking forward to your questions and engaging with you and understanding and learning what you guys are doing and how you're using it. And Yeah. So with that, I'd say let's get started. Good evening, Denver. I'm so excited to be here for Startup Week. We've got an awesome talk, a lot of fun, some interesting stuff here. So why don't we jump right in? So we're going to talk about Heal Thyself, using sentiment analysis for self-reflection. There's a lot in there to unpack, but we're going to have fun doing it. So first of all, who am I? Well, I'm Michael Gray. I'm a director of engineering at Skookum, based out of Charlotte. A little quick past history. I'm a former CTO of a startup named Glow Sherpa out of Portland, Oregon. So yes, I am very familiar with the startup world, startup scene, which is why I'm here. And I love building things, especially proof of concepts, which means I get to, play with lots of stuff, learn fast, and make a lot of mistakes, which is really all part of the fun. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about sentiment analysis, of course. What is it? How does it work? Some use cases. But more importantly, we're going to get into some code, right? We're going to show you how to quickly and easily, yes, in 4 lines of code, actually test it out, get your hands dirty. Then we'll actually tie back into that heal thyself, right? The self-reflection. What does that mean? And how do we marry the two? So once you do that, again, we'll jump into an example. We'll have some fun with that. And then I want to hear from you. What are your questions? How are you using it? Let's make this a conversation. All right, you ready? Let's go. So first, what is sentiment analysis? It may seem a bit obvious to most of you, but let's just make sure, right? So it is a natural language processing, right? For some of you, I already lost you right there. Essentially, it is analyzing someone's words and applying some meaning to it. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? Right? Are they happy? Are they sad? So it's really analyzing someone's words and saying, this is how we think they feel about it. That's really what it is. You may hear it called other names. So you may hear it referred to as opinion mining, natural language processing, computational linguistics, and text analytics. But essentially, it's all the same thing. Well, how does it actually work? So you take this word cloud, your heart, your feelings, your emotions, and you put it into this engine. And what does it do? Well, first thing it does is that it actually detects the language, which you would say is pretty important, right? So if I know that you're speaking English, then I can apply then this other tools and logic against English words versus other languages, right? So that's the first thing it does. Then it takes this sentence, these paragraphs, and it breaks it down into very small pieces, essentially words. Quite often you see it referred to as tokens, but effectively as words. And when we get into some of the code and some of the demos, you actually see it, and it really is pretty straightforward. So once it has the words, then it'll go through and it'll throw out the ums, the thes, the so, the meh. It'll throw out some of those things, and then get to really the words that it says, these words really are helping me understand how someone feels, right? So it may identify some topics, some words, some trends, depending, it sort of depends on the engine. And once it's done all of that, then it'll actually then apply sentiment. So quite honestly, most of the time you'll see, these basic smiley faces, right? These emojis that they're telling you how someone feels. We'll actually dive a little bit deeper, so you can get some sense of actually how those faces get painted on the screen. All right. So although most of the time you'll see these smiley faces, there's actually some math, some numbers behind here that really help you understand how do we decide that something that someone shared is either positive or negative or neutral. What you have under the sentiment engine is a score. So I've put in some text, right? Sentiment analysis is awesome, very excellent. Is it positive or negative? Now, obviously, that sentence is pretty contrived, but I did that for a key point.
So if we look at the sentiment engine, you have a score 7. Well, what does that mean? So quickly, anything that's above a 0 in this sense is positive. A 0 is going to be seen as neutral, neither negative or positive, and anything less than 0 is negative. So in this score here, you see you have a 7. Well, how did you get a 7? Well, if you look just below that, you'll see calculation. So there you can see that it took various words and said, this word actually is rated as being positive or negative, and it actually calculates the number score. So with that, you can see negative is -2, positive is 2, excellent is 3, and so on. And so from there, you can see how you get to a score of 7. What's really, really interesting about this is that it then allows you to get to those 3 states that I described right below. But on the Vader engine, this engine was actually created for social media. So to analyze how people feel on Twitter, on Facebook, what have you, and it is actually a little bit more sophisticated. If you'll notice quickly below, you'll see there are more emojis, right? Emoticons. And that's because it actually can tell you how negative, how neutral, how positive a response is, therefore giving you the ability to calculate or determine a much broader set of feelings that someone has and even the strength of those feelings. So it's pretty powerful. It's pretty cool. Before we jump into some code, I just want to show you or talk through a couple of use cases here. So I've already mentioned the fact that we have the social media items, but this is also used by companies to understand how customers feel about their products. So they have these tools where they're looking at various comments on social media, where the hashtags have their names, and they build these complex dashboards that give them a sense of how people are talking about their brand, talking about their customer support, and what can they do to make this better, right? This is a whole new realm of world. You even have it in customer support, real time, where customers are calling in and the conversation is being analyzed in real time. And when certain words are used or conversation is trending negative, quite often this will automatically generate a supervisor coming in and helping to then address the issue. It's also used to provide feedback to that customer support person on how to better handle situations. So there's really a myriad of examples of how it's being used today. So it's really powerful. Now, all the examples that I just gave you are about the collective, right? It's about what this company's doing, what the Twitter horde means. We're going to break it down and get to how can you interact with sentiment analysis. How can you use it for just yourself, just for fun, just for fun, and just for learning. So with that, let's jump to some code. So we're going to start here with a really simple analysis here. Okay. So here, and we're actually just going to go ahead and comment this out for now. We'll come to this. What I have here is, I mentioned earlier, with 4 lines of code, you can start to get your hands dirty with sentiment analysis, right? So there's an engine called Sentiment, and it is a tool that's out there that you can use whether you're using Node.js or whether you're using Python. You'll be able to quickly actually integrate this library into your code and actually then actually apply sentiment to some text. So with this, we're going to start out with sentiment. So what we've done is we've gone ahead and, although we've done it, we can go ahead and do it again. You can just do a simple npm install sentiment. And what they'll do is they'll go ahead and install the engine for you. And then once you have that, then essentially it really is this simple. Now, what you see on the screen, this is not magic that I've created. When you go to the actual GitHub site, this code is sitting right there waiting for you. So you can get started as easily as a copy paste. Now, so here you just go in and you say, hey, I want to use the sentiment library, and I'll create a new instance of that. And then once I do that, then essentially I'm going to say analyze. Analyze what? I'm going to pass in a sentence here, a statement, and then go ahead and run it. So why don't I do that real quick, and then we can talk about the results. Okay, so what you have here, let me just hone in on this real quick to make sure you can see that. Here, as I mentioned before, right, you have your total score, and you have the breakdown of how you came up with that score, all the words that were processed. So as I mentioned previously, the Vader, which is the engine here, actually gives you a higher degree of fidelity about how someone feels, right? So what you can see here is with 4 lines of code, we were able to pass it in a sentence and pass it in some text and quickly have it calculate how we feel. Now, we'll go ahead with the Vader engine. I'll uncomment that. And we'll actually pass it in another sentence here. Let me do a quick clear. So we have the Vader engine, and funny enough, essentially with 4 lines of code, technically it's 3 lines of code here, you are able to apply sentiment to actually look at the results the same way. For example, if you were to use Amazon's sentiment engine, Google, they actually use a Vader type engine. So as you can see here below, we have the here negative, neutral. So in this sentence of Vader is very smart, handsome, and funny, right? There are no negative words there. Neutral words, and actually has some words that it says, Vader is, right? And those really have no meaning to it. It's 70% positive, and the rest neutral. And again, here you can actually see how positive or how neutral it is. And so based on thresholds, then you can begin to just think about, you can apply all sorts of sort of logic assigned with that. So sentiment analysis is not that scary, at least to jump into and begin to play with. The code that's here is directly on the GitHub pages. So it's very easy to get into and to start to play with different things with your friends. Or if you're thinking about a business case or use case, this is a fun and easy and very cheap way to get started. So now that we've seen how easy it is to do that, then let's actually talk about words. So the talk is heal thyself, right? Self-reflection. So there's quite a bit of research that's happening today that is looking at actually all the words people use on social media, but also really as it relates to actually our own internal well-being, right? This is something that's been really highlighted during this whole COVID phase, where actually people have more time to themselves to think and reflect. And so the words that they have in their mind and their head really has an effect on their overall view of life. And so there's a really interesting quote here that was actually being done by the Wharton School of Education, where they're saying that word choices really can tell you a lot about someone's mental health. And the use case they even mentioned here is that they can even actually have a high predictability of whether or not you're going to default on a loan, on how good a customer service person is based on pronoun usage. There are lots of things that understanding the words that we use can tell us, and what they say to other people. As I mentioned, this research is being done also by the National Institute of Health in Britain, in Harvard Medical School. All right, so now that we know that words are important, how do we then integrate that with helping people help themselves. So, what tools and programs can I practice so that I'm more aware of the words that I use? And then, with that knowledge, then how can I maybe improve my own health, my own well being, or things I want to work on? And so, this is a really fascinating field for me. And so, I thought, this is an opportunity to combine both that research and sentiment analysis. So I thought I'd put together a kind of a fun little UI, little tool for us to have a little fun with that. Okay, so let's jump back over and we'll talk through it. So here I've just created, it's a React application, and it's using that sentiment analysis engine that we looked at earlier. Um, and so just thought I had a couple of fun things that we play with. And so of course with this you can be as fun or as silly, as you like to be. My favorite one to play with is actually mayonnaise. Now, I if I were to use a strong word, I would say that I detest mayonnaise. Um, and I'm always fascinated by the fact that mayonnaise is the default condiment on sandwiches and wraps. So I think I'm going to start a movement to see if we can get that changed to mustard. Who's with me? All right. So let's say we want to get someone's sentiment about what they think about mayonnaise. Well, we can just pop in here and let's go ahead and let's give your fingers a break, and let's just go ahead and record. Look at the question here. Why is mayo the default condiment on sandwiches and wraps? And kind of get your thoughts. Go. Well, I think mustard should be the default condiment. It is tasty, it is great, and it lasts longer in the sun. Now, pretty silly, yes, but it'd be pretty interesting for us to then analyze that. And in doing so, we can see that we got a score of 3, which is positive. But of course, the really interesting piece here is to analyze the details, right? So let's zoom in here quickly so you can see that. So just like before, in that entire sentence, we were able to see that the positive word they pulled out there is great. And it was able to assign a score of 3 to that. You can see all of the words, right? I broke down that sentence and said, hey, these are all the words I need to look at to consider whether or not I give a score. And there was nothing negative, so now I can go ahead and calculate my score. So the whole purpose of this obviously really is to look at how you can take those 4 lines of code, essentially, begin to apply different user experiences to that. Allow people to input their feelings, whether it's talking, whether it's text, and then you could then take this and provide some sort of response to it visually, whether you actually direct them or take them to some other experience based on their sentiment, or whether there's a follow-up that you have, but it really is an open field for you here. The key thing with healing and self-awareness is here really understanding and visually seeing the words that you use. So whether it's a silly issue like, do I like mayonnaise, or whether or not it's actually, one of the other items like true self-reflection. For example, what has gone well for you in 2020, which for a lot of folks that may actually be a hard statement, right? The ability to reflect and see the words that you use really can have a real impact on your day-to-day and even your future. And so it is helpful to understand how others are seeing, hearing, and applying meaning to your words. But I think you should also have that same power. All right. So with that, let's go to questions. Thank you.
thanks everyone for watching. I'm definitely more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. The question is a good question. I'm on here is that how does the engine account for context? So I think Mayo is great, right? Versus I think Mayo is, I think both good and great were used to describe Mayo. And the interesting thing here is that it really depends on the engine. One of the reasons that I highlighted the Vader engine in particular is that it does a pretty good job of looking at negation. For example, if you put force for change actually around a text. An important thing to know is that most engines are at best 70% accurate. So you always have to weigh things with that in mind. But yeah, so when you look at, for example, AWS, if you look at their system analysis and Google in particular, I'm not sure if they actually use the Vader engine itself, but the engine they use is very similar. If you try to compare content and scores and have that negation. There's also, does the system, or how does the system take into account people with learning disabilities who may not communicate the same? And I would say, at least in the experience I have thus far, that is an area that's actually fairly lacking. And I do know that folks are working on improving that engine, but it still has a ways to go. So this is a great question here around if you don't have any experience coding, what's a good place to start? Are there any websites? Actually, I'm gonna elearn.com that really, number one, breaks down how to get started, and they've got some tools on their site that you can just use and play with directly without even writing any code. That helps you understand how things work. Thanks, Becky.